And for the introduction, I'd like to hear, just have a little context of who is on the line. If you could just share what your role is and who, what organization you work for, and in the chat, so I could just kind of see it scroll up as we're going through and to have context. As I go through the information that I'm going to share, some of you will be familiar with it. Hopefully you'll have some takeaways of some new resources or updated resources. Some hopefully will be new information, and I welcome any questions throughout. So feel free to raise your hand and ask, or add it into the chat. And Dominica, if you wouldn't mind, if someone does ask a question, I miss it, to call it out, that'd be great.
Yes, thank you.
And maybe before I just want to be able to see here, let's see if I could see the chat a little bit better. There we go. I want to maybe just share briefly, I've a little background. Besides being in this role at the University of Alaska, or in this office in particular, since 2013, I've had about going on 15 years in workforce development. I didn't know that was a lane when I was in college. No one said, oh, you can have a career in workforce development. And it's been a really interesting experience in looking at what the jobs are available in our state, and what the training is that's available, and how do we align that and create as many pathways for Alaskans as possible to become trained and employed. Going back, I've spent more than half of my life now in Alaska, and I have an affinity for helping our state be as successful as possible. And I think we have a lot of the right ingredients to do that. It's just figuring out how to connect Alaskans to those opportunities. And I think this group in particular, and the work that a lot of you are doing, when I look through and see a lot of advisors are on the line, those that are in workforce development as well. There's some faculty. Those faculty have really powerful connections with students in your classroom. But when you get to work directly with students or future potential students, that is a really incredible, powerful seat to be in. I'm way far removed from directly working with students, and that you all get to be that kind of front line. My hope today is that you have some resources to do that with, and to help guide students so that they know what those opportunities are in our state. I have more slides than I'm going to have time to share today. But I purposefully did that so that you have resources to go back and reference. And so I will kind of speed through some of them, and just know that when Dominica shares those out, at least you'll have the content there to reference. So I want to just start kind of high level, big picture context. I'm sure several of you have heard, for more than a decade now, we have had net migration, meaning there is less people coming into our state than there are leaving. And that has created a very more narrow workforce pipeline. Part of the reason is there's less high school graduates. Not that they're not graduating high school, there's just less people, less students coming out of high school. That population is declining, and it's slated to continue to decline for a while. So that's a big feeder into our pipeline that we just have less numbers of. We also had a portion of our working age adults, a large portion of those were the ones who chose to leave the state over the last decade. And that increased our access to a skilled workforce. And then one of the growing populations, though, is our aging population. The impact on the workforce is they're leaving the workforce, and that's widening the gap that we have to bridge. It is an awesome opportunity, though, for Alaskans who want to either advance their careers or start a new career or just obtain a new skill at an entry-level position. There's going to continue to be a lot of opportunities for years to come. And this just literally came out, I think, late last week from the Department of Labor. If you don't subscribe to their Trends magazine, I highly recommend it. And they have, it comes out once a month. And this particular edition, they publish every 2 years, if I recall, projecting out what the jobs are going to look like over the next decade. And if you just scan through what these projections are by occupational group, while there are some that are entry level and don't require some form of post-secondary education, there's certainly a large group of them that require either a traditional 4-year degree or short-term training, some sort of post-secondary training beyond high school. So helping Alaskans understand that there needs to be that continuum is really important for filling these jobs projecting into the future. And let me go back and just mention one other thing. With these projections, there's Department of Labor is saying about 40,000 job openings annually is what is being projected. 2,200 of those are new openings in emerging areas. And then the bulk of them, though, about 37,000, are replacement, meaning someone vacated that position and it's now becoming open. And similarly, the Georgetown University released a study in 2023, and they're projecting around that. They said about 37,000. So in the ballpark. And you can see this breakdown here of what types of post-secondary are going to be required. And just as many, if not just slightly more, is short-term training. So 2 years or less. And then the other portion of that is bachelor's and above, as far as those that require some form of post-secondary. And you can see the breakdown from the university side, what our current students are. And while there's a fair number there that we're working on training, we really need more people in that pipeline getting training overall in our state. This is just a mention on the value of post-secondary education. Probably don't need to emphasize that too much with this audience, but I will mention that the data here is from Department of Labor. That's real numbers of Alaskan wages based on level of education. And we just know as people get more training throughout their careers, they have greater opportunity themselves, but it also overall creates a stronger economy for our state. So getting into what's the university's role in this? We are the state's public university system comprised of 3 separately accredited universities, University of Alaska Anchorage, Fairbanks, and Southeast in Juneau. And amongst those 3 universities with their unique missions, there are 13 community campuses as well. So we are unique in that as a state, our community college mission is embedded in our university system. And you can see we have a breadth of programs because of that kind of dual mission of community college and traditional college. We have over 400 programs. About half of those are short term. And I really try to emphasize that so people understand that we have everything from a industry recognized like 6-week credential all the way through to a PhD. And there's just a lot of opportunities across our state through our 3 universities and their community campuses. To have the on-ramps and off-ramps, which this slide really demonstrates. What we'd like to see is that high school students are getting an experience with a college level course in dual enrollment and having that secondary program and pathway of study into a post-secondary opportunity. And we can partner in that aspect. And then if they choose to get a short-term program, maybe they or complete a short-term program, maybe they go get use that skill to get employed, and then come back and on-ramp for stacking another credential, whether that's an associate's degree or bachelor's and above. So out of those 400 programs, trying to make it a little more applicable to those working, especially with students and advising them, we created these workforce reports in partnership with Department of Labor and Workforce Development, using actual employment outcomes of our graduates. And we now are heading into our third publication of these. We update them every 2 years. So you can see here on the slide, new reports are coming in early 2025. But the ones that are posted from with 2023 data and the previous 10 years worth of graduate outcomes are still very relevant. They hit on 11 of the state's really high demand industries. And anything from administration, finance to IT, which are very much those industry sectors that support all other industry sectors. Those of you that in your own organizations, you think about those in accounting or those in human resources or those who just help make all our technology run. Nearly every industry depends on those. And then there's those that are very specific: healthcare, mining, oil and gas, construction. So there is a QR code here that goes directly to the reports, but I'll also put it in the chat so that you can access the 11 reports that are posted there. And these are what their reports look like. We tried to keep them pretty streamlined, so not too overwhelming, but having some really relevant content for a particular industry sector and the university programs that are serving that sector. So this first page speaks to what are kind of some highlighted programs and those graduate outcomes that are important to that industry sector, how that boosts the Alaska's hire rate, and then what those wages are, what types of industries, on the second page, what types of industries those students go and work in, and where they're working physically in our state. This lower left-hand corner here on page 2, in the current version that's posted, speaks to what the hiring kind of trends have been by the industry over the past 3 years. In this upcoming version, we've modified that to be specific to our graduates and highlight the demographics, which are pretty interesting across the industry sectors, to really take a look at what those demographics are. And then the third page gives a nice overview of the industry. It's some context about the importance of it to our state, and then a table demonstrating all the outcomes between certificates, associates, and then bachelor's and above. And the last page, if you're wondering, well, what programs specifically are represented in this report, you have an inventory of all the programs that are represented and kind of gives some context of what's available across the state. This is a summary of all 11 reports since 2011. I graduated over nearly 27,000 students. And you can see the outcomes here from both short-term and longer-term programs. The employment rates are very high, 75% or above. And then the average wages, even in comparison of the Alaska average wage, which is almost $57,000, for the certificate and associate, those shorter term programs, by the time they ramp up to their 5th year out in employment, they're already exceeding that. And then if students spend a little bit more time obtaining training and education and get a bachelor's or above, they are already at that average wage on average for Alaska, coming right out of college, and then typically exceeding that by their 5th year. And it really does. When we train Alaskans, it boosts Alaska's hire rate. And that's probably not news to any of you. But the more, I would say, especially thinking back to that net migration slide, the influence that you all have to really help encourage those that you speak with and work directly with, whether they're students or future students, to stay in Alaska as much as possible and obtain training here. That will be good for Alaska as a whole. And I get some students are going to want to go no matter what, but I sometimes will hear those encouraging students to go who maybe they're not thinking of going. So the more we can encourage students to stay in Alaska, it really will help bridge some of the gaps that we are experiencing in our workforce. These are some demographics from those nearly 27,000 graduates. And you can see we certainly as a state serve a portion of first-gen students, meaning they don't have kind of a family history of going to a university. And there's also a large portion that are graduates of Alaska's high schools. And then some we help recruit into the state that didn't maybe graduate here, who came here for college, or they moved here for other reasons and eventually ended up coming to the university. For the working age distribution, we certainly have some traditional students who are under age 25, but we have a much larger portion of non-traditional students. And those typically are going part-time and working their way through their programs to advance their skills. You can see our graduates are working all over the state in all 6 economic regions. And then this gets into a breakdown of all the different reports. And so for time's sake, I'm going to just speed through these and mention maybe just a couple points. Construction's going to be a big one. It's going to continue to grow because of all the infrastructure projects from federal funding that are coming into our state. Broadband deployment needs to be built and put in and maintained. There's a deep water port going in Nome. Those are just a couple big ticket items that are being driven by construction. And with that, we have had a pretty extensive initiative with our industry partners and developed this video that you all can use for advancing, just increasing awareness of the construction industry and the programs that are available. It's not a very long video. I think it's a great tool to use for students who might be interested in this field. Teacher education is going to continue to be very important for our state and growing our own. You get access denied. Is that, Dorothy, is that to the reports? Maybe we could sort that out. Then the blog. Let me see really quick. It should be a public site. So cruising on through, all of these are here for you to reference when Dominica sends it out. I just want to end a touching base on, it's one thing, we have all these great jobs in our state. The university offers a lot of programs, training individuals for those jobs. And I also think that we have a lot of funding opportunities for Alaskans to increase their access to education. And one of the pieces that just got unlocked this year, thanks to legislation going through, was expansion of the Alaska Performance Scholarship. And I'm sure someone, Dominica, from your team at ACPE or others are speaking about this too. And in much more detail than I can do it justice, but I just want to mention, the more you all can learn about the APS and especially the changes over this past year, there's some great tools, this flyer that's out there. breaking down what those changes are. And one of the things I'm really excited about is the expansion of pathways for career and technical education, those shorter term programs. So now students can access APS at a higher level for both kind of traditional college programs as well as those shorter term career and technical education programs. The funding levels expanded, the length of time expanded. It just overall made it more accessible for Alaskans to utilize. And then we can't beat the drum enough for Alaskans to complete their FAFSA, and so that it unlocks what federal financial aid they'll have available. And there's great resources out there, both through ACPE, the university, even Department of Labor job centers have gotten on board, really helping to spread that word and help Alaskans with that financial aid application. And then there's the University of Alaska Scholars Program is also another avenue. So those three I want to mention, but I recognize there's so many other scholarship and funding opportunities through various avenues. I really believe by and large, most students, we can get a pretty solid financial aid package put together if we can increase awareness of what's out there. And this is one other funding program through that's administered through the Alaska Department of Labor and Workforce Development, the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act, or WIOA. This is a federally funded program that provides funding through the job centers that are placed all over the state. And as a university, we have now qualified through the Department of Labor. 366 programs are eligible for WIOA funding. And that comprises now 50% of all programs on the eligible training provider list that Department of Labor manages. What that really means, it just increases access to that funding. And what I really appreciate about this funding is after federal financial aid is applied and other, this funding can provide wraparound services. So if a barrier to education is transportation or childcare, housing, some of those additional pieces that are needed, if a student qualifies, they can access this funding to remove those barriers and really expedite their time to completion. So we've really engaged with the Department of Labor to increase the number of programs that are eligible on this for this funding and really streamlining the processes to increase access for students. This is another resource that the university offers is Career Coach. And I'll put the link there in the chat, although that kind of came up a little bit weird. I could probably give you the shorter one. There you go. Hopefully you can access that one. This is a great tool for helping students explore their interests, align to careers, and then see what training's available. All the university programs are mapped to careers in Career Coach, as well as AVTEX programs are mapped in here. And I see this as if you want to get a student's interest before they get too deep into exploring their careers, this is a great starting point. It's robust enough, but intuitive and easy to follow. It gives students kind of that quick resource and engagement. And then if they want to take it further, I think working with ACAC, Alaska Career Information Systems, and ACPE is a wonderful avenue to do that, where they can build out a full personal learning and career plan. And I come to the end of my slide. So I'll share these with Dominica, and if you all have any questions with the last 60 seconds that I have, I'd welcome it.
Thank you so much, Tara. You have more than 60 seconds. Don't worry about that. I don't see any questions. I have shared the resources as you were speaking. Also the video for those who missed the QR code. And with that, when you said 2025, sometime at the beginning of 2025, the new resources will be published. Okay, so just
Yes.
check the website for updates.
It'll be posted there. We're targeting I'm actually targeting right before holiday break, but
All right.
hopefully January at the latest. I give a little grace because things take longer than planned at times, but they'll be out there in early 2025.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Do we have any questions? Let's see. We do actually have 2 questions, Terry.
Okay, are there strategies for information Terry has shared to share with rural districts? I'll say from my office, one thing that we have done is utilized Department of Education and Early Development's CTE listserv and sent information out that way. And also presenting at some of the conferences that bring people in from rural locations. But if there's other responses on the line of strategies you all are using or ideas that we can help support, please let me know. Ricky, is there anything specific you were looking for? I'm really curious if we could look ahead in into the future, which we can't, but I'm curious how broadband's going to impact opportunities, because that is going to open up not only opportunities for learning, but it'll open up opportunities for remote work and allow people to stay in rural locations where maybe there hasn't been as many opportunities as their interests align to. And that will open up opportunities to advise those individuals on what is available to do remotely and both for learning and work. And then the other questions, Dorothy, how do I get my program on the resource list? It looks like you're with South Central Foundation, working with the Department of Labor Job Center. If you're based here in Anchorage, there's the Midtown one. They can walk you through how to go about getting on that list. If you look up eligible training provider list for the state of Alaska, there's some resources online and I think directions on how to submit programs. If you're with the university, for those listening, if you don't see your program on the list, that request does go through my office and we help try to remove the onus off of you all having to do those steps. Okay, Dominica, thank you.
Thank you, Terry, as always.
All right.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Good to see you all.